So the Eagles are in the Super Bowl tomorrow, and to make my Wiz Wit cheesesteak pizza, we obviously need dough, and dough can't be ready on command. So we're going to make it tonight, and I got everything pre-measured here. So the recipe, I never really used the same recipe twice. I'm not a big recipe guy, but the best way to find easy recipes, common sense ways to make dough here is in the Art of Pizza Making, made by a Northeast PA guy. Highly recommended. But the base dough recipe that I like to use and modify is right here on page 29. I'll drop the link below so that you can find it. Pretty easy and simple, but really all we're going to need is some warm water, some salt, sugar, a little yeast here, whoops, a little blooper right out of the chute there, and a little olive oil, right? And then all we got to do is we're going to mix it all together here and combine this before we put the flour in. Alright, so we'll just do one little last splash in the bottom to make sure that it's all mixed in. And it is. So there's a million different dough recipes out there, and you can get as complicated and as scientific as you want. But my rule of thumb is, whatever recipe I like to do with dough, is I only put in 3/4 of the amount of flour that is called for in the recipe, and then I let it mix. Because really, the ingredients can't be measured depending on humidity, temperature of the water, temperature of the flour, type of flour. I'm using high gluten flour, which is really what you need for great pizza. You can use bread flour, but you're not going to get the same results. So look for high gluten flour. Caputo 00 is really the best in my opinion. But the reason I like to use only 3/4 is because you can build fiber and make a nice soft dough, and then you can add more flour as it goes. As the dough is mixing, you just want to check on it and see, how it's doing here. So I'm going to grab a piece off. I still didn't add any extra flour yet, and it is pretty close to the consistency that I want it here. A little bit tacky, so I'm going to have to add a little, but it might just be a dusting. So actually, this is taking on 1 cup less than the recipe calls for. So that's why it's important to add as you go. And sometimes you're going to need to add some water in to soften it up a bit, but this is coming along pretty nice. Alright, so that's all mixed up. And this is a double batch of dough based on the recipe here. But again, we can make a whole show out of just dough. And there's nothing scientific about this. I'm making a double crust Philly cheesesteak pizza, as I said. So I'm simply just going to cut this in half. And then we just got to roll it up. This would be enough to do like a really thick 16-inch by 16-inch Sicilian. But we're going to make this sort of a rectangle, Old Forge size. And sort of roll it up. Pat it down. I made the bottom crust a little thicker than the top crust, so that it has something nice when you pick it up. It has a nice thick crust, so it doesn't kind of get greasy and fall through. So that's it. Roll them up. I'm going to put in some olive oil, throw them in a container, and get them in the fridge right away. Alright, so we got about 5 hours to kick off, and the dough's all ready, so we're letting it out, get relaxed now. And I'm going to start prepping. Got to cut the onions up because it's a Wiz Wit. Wit, W-I-T, means you're adding onions to it. And then we got to cook the steak as well. I'm not a big steak-em guy. I like to use sliced shaved beef instead of that, or the formed patties. Get my griddle nice and hot, so I'm going to chop up the onions, take it over, and fire it up on the grill. Alright, so we have about 2.5 pounds of meat here. And we're going to season up with some Montreal steak, one of my favorites to use in the kitchen. You can also just use salt, pepper, garlic, that type of thing. And just stir it around till it's... I'm going to cook this a little bit medium rare because it is going to continue cooking in the oven. So don't cook it too far, but make sure you get a little charring like on pieces like this. That gives you flavor. So we grilled up our mound of steak here. This is probably going to be more steak than we need, but put some paper towels under it to drain the grease out because that's going to make for a sloppy pizza if we don't do that. Same here with the onions. And now it's time to play with some dough. And we let it rise overnight in the fridge, and then I pulled it out to let it relax a little bit before we play with it here. So I have this seasoned pan. It may just look dirty, but it's actually seasoned and used many times. You don't wash these, you just sort of get the excess out. I like to use lard, but I don't have any lard in the house today, so we're going to use a little Crisco in the bottom of the pan. Sort of smear it around a little bit. You can use oil in the bottom of the pan, but I find that when you're trying to press the dough out to the edges, it'll sort of keep sucking back in. So using the vegetable Crisco here, it keeps the dough in place as you're working with it. So I like to do it slowly over time when I'm doing a double crust pizza. So I'll just press it out as far as the dough will allow me to go. And then I'll set it on top of the oven and then just let it raise over there a little bit. Let it relax and raise. Since I'm starting early, like I said, about 5 hours to kick off, I can afford to do this. So I'll let it raise and then press it out again, and then we'll put the good stuff in. So we let it raise, and you can see we have the dough out to the corners, which is a must for me. So we have it all risen up, and we're going to start adding some cheese and the steak and the onions here. I'm going to start with American cheese on the bottom. This will provide a little moisture barrier, give it a better shelf life when it's sitting out for the party. And also, it has a creaminess. It tends not to congeal as much as the mozzarella or the cheddar that I'm about to use here. So, just going to lay those out there just like that. We'll start on the bottom with a little bit of sharp cheddar cheese. I like the yellow for the color, kind of remind you of the Wiz, which, by the way, don't put it in the microwave for a full minute like I did, otherwise you're going to have a total mess. So we'll add a little yellow cheddar. I'm a big cheese blend guy when I'm cooking. I like to have little different flavors and textures all over the place. So add a little cheese, and then make sure when you're spreading stuff that there is a bite of steak and a bite of onion and a bite of everything in every bite. So I'm really big on making sure things are evenly distributed. Not like this, but got all the ingredients in there. I added a little garlic because it's a lot of cheese in there. It's going to sap some flavor, so we need a little garlic to balance it out, along with the steak and the seasonings we used here. And we pressed out the dough. I like to press it out by hand. You might want to use a rolling pin for it. I like the little slight variations in the crust from doing it by hand, and then we're just going to flop it right down in. Make sure the corners line up like so, and then we're just going to press it into the corners. You don't have to get too perfect at this point. And you want to grab a pizza cutter, and I like to use the butt of it like this, and we're going to make a little noise and go. Which gives you this nice little crust in the, and it binds it together to make sure that the cheese isn't going to leak out. So there we have it. And then you just want to pinch a little hole in the top, sort of a pressure release valve, so you don't get a big bubble. What do they call that? Like a quiche or something, where there's a big bubble. Or a souffle is what I'm thinking of. And then you just want to coat it with a little olive oil. This will help it brown and crisp up on the top. You could use a brush, but I like to get my hands right in there and get dirty. Then we're just going to season it with garlic, salt, garlic, pepper, and oregano. I might throw a little rosemary on there, and then we're going to throw it in the oven. Okay, so I think we're about done here. We're going to pull it out. Nice golden brown top to it. You can see it looks like the cheese is melted inside very nicely. Now, you don't want to cut this thing right away, otherwise the cheese is just going to rush out. So we're going to let it sit a little bit. And then sometimes it's even better to let it sit and cool all the way, and then reheat it because everything sort of congeals a little bit better. But really happy with the results. I did end up going with a little rosemary on top, and it smells terrific. So can't wait to eat it. Here we have the finished product. Nice and brown all the way around here. And let's give it a cut to give you an idea what it looks like inside. Ooey, gooey, cheesy, delicious. Well, I don't know if it's delicious. I didn't try it yet, but it sure does look like a Wiz Wit Philly cheesesteak. And we're going to enjoy this during the game. I hope it's real enjoyable and the Eagles win. So I'm going to go put this down on the menu and get going. But hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions about it, let me know. If not, go Eagles.